Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Iran says indirect talks with the US in Oman start positively but offer no clear way to ease fears of a US attack. Tehran warns deep mistrust remains after past US strikes, with future talks still uncertain. The US and Ukraine discuss a March target for a peace deal with Russia, but territorial disputes make delays likely. Any agreement would be put to a Ukrainian referendum held alongside national elections. IS claims responsibility for a suicide bombing at a mosque in Islamabad that kills at least 31 people and wounds 169. The group says the attacker detonates an explosive vest amid a Shiite congregation. Donald Trump reposts a video depicting Barack and Michelle Obama as apes before removing it after backlash. The post draws bipartisan condemnation, with Senator Tim Scott calling it racist. Trump signs an order warning of new US tariffs on countries that continue to trade with Iran, citing a possible 25% rate. The move comes as US-Iran talks continue in Oman, with Trump restating opposition to Iranian nuclear weapons. A US appeals court upholds Trump's policy of mandatory detention for migrants without bond. The 2-1 ruling marks the first appellate backing despite widespread lower court opposition. The White House plans the first leaders' meeting of Trump's Board of Peace on Gaza for February the 19th. The talks, still in early stages, are set to include a Gaza reconstruction plan. Investigators examine a newly surfaced message in the search for the missing mother of US journalist Savannah Guthrie. Authorities say the message is being checked for authenticity as the search enters a 6th day. Those are the headlines. We start with our top story, and the United States and India have reached a framework for an interim trade agreement. Ambassador to India from the United States, Sergio Gore, hailed it as a new day, crediting President Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi for their leadership and their vision. This deal opens a $30 trillion market for Indian exporters, boosting MSMEs, farmers, fishermen, and creating thousands of jobs for women and youth. The US will cut reciprocal tariffs on Indian goods to 18% across textiles, apparel, leather, plastics, organic chemicals, home decor, artisanal products, and select machinery. Tariffs on pharmaceuticals, gems, diamonds, and aircraft parts will drop to 0. India will also get exemptions under Section 232 on aircraft parts, tariff weight quotas on auto parts, and negotiated outcomes on generic pharmaceuticals. Sensitive agricultural and dairy products will remain fully protected. The agreement strengthens technology trade, supply chain resilience, and digital trade rules. It sets the stage for a full US-India bilateral trade agreement promoting shared economic growth and innovation. Joining us now is Jayjit Bhattacharya, an economist and finance expert, joining us live from the studio. Thank you very much for joining us here, Jayjit. It's always a great pleasure to get your input on these issues. What is the significance of this deal? Of course, a huge development when it was announced. How will it change the life of the economic life of Indians and Americans alike? And how is this putting us one step closer towards that bilateral free trade agreement between the United States and India?
Yeah, I think the steps is essentially the interim trade agreement that has just been mentioned, which will go live on Saturday. And the next step would be the bilateral trade agreement. And at some point in time in future, we will possibly have a free trade agreement also with the United States. So those will be the progression in the US-India trade relationship. As I've mentioned many times in your channel, India and US are natural allies, both geopolitically as well as geoeconomically. They are largely complementary. They're exactly on the two halves of this globe, and they largely have been in the past providing a stabilizing effect on the rest of the world. So it's important that things go back to normal, and I think this interim trade agreement is a step towards that, and it's very much mutually beneficial. Clearly, it helps India because we have been hit by not being able to trade with US. We were able to overcome that hit. We were able to grow our exports. With this trade deal coming in, the Indian exports will go very, very sharply. Similarly, from a US perspective, they had been hit by inflation on the ground on products which really hurt the common citizens, which includes food and daily necessities. And with this trade agreement with India, many of those costs will come down for the US. And also, many of the feedstock coming from India will feed into the manufacturing for the US industry. So it will make US more competitive as this particular trade deal gets into the ground today.
And JJ, does cutting tariffs to 18% meaningfully improve competitiveness for Indian exporters? And who is set to benefit immediately?
Yeah, a whole range of industries from textiles to many of the agricultural exports for that matter, chemicals, and so on. Also, we need to keep in mind that who are the competitors for some of these industries. If you look at textiles, for example, it's largely Bangladesh and Pakistan and Vietnam and so on. And clearly, the trade deal that India has got is better than any of these other competitors in the textile industry. So India would tend to gain. In fact, overall, for all other products also, excluding EU and Japan and UK, India's got the best trade deal for US. And as you mentioned, it's the largest market. It's a $38 trillion market. Having said that, some of the provisions of Section 232 is still in place. For example, I did not hear anything about steel and aluminium. And therefore, those are sectors where India is competitive, but we don't see an exemption. And hence, those are still issues to be resolved as we move forward. But overall, it's a deal which provides India significant competitive edge compared to the others who are in the same industry.
No mention of India halting the purchase of Russian oil. Do we know anything else about that?
There has been no official declaration from either the Indian side or the Russian side. In fact, Russia has officially said that they haven't heard anything which implies that India is going to stop purchasing Russian oil till the time Russian oil is sanctioned. As of now, there is no sanction against the Russian oil by the United Nations. And India has repeatedly said that it will follow the rule-based order. And as per the rule-based order, it is free to continue to purchase Russian oil. If there is any other subtext to the deal between India and the US, it is not there in public. And so we'll have to wait and see how that thing develops.
We've seen, of course, especially within the last few weeks, couple of months or so, many close US allies visit China. We have, of course, seen that huge trade deal agreement signed between the EU and India. How much of this do you think was rushed by the United States, seeing all these developments happening around them?
It's a common belief and perception that the EU-India trade deal kind of pushed the US to accelerate the deal with India, because in what we understand, the deal is pretty much the same as what it was in April of 2025. So nothing significantly has changed in the wordings of the deal. And therefore, the only reason why the deal got precipitated at such a short notice after the EU-India trade pact is possibly because of the EU-India trade pact, and that's the general belief. So it did appear that the EU-India trade deal played a significant role in accelerating the US-India trade deal.
And Jayjit, how realistic is a full US-India bilateral trade agreement in the near term?
Well, that's a question that's still open because there are still many outstanding issues that needs to be resolved. But from what we hear from the U.S. administration and also whatever little we hear from the Indian government, it does seem to be around the corner. And not just that, given the past record of the U.S. walking out of deals, including the fact that it put 50% tariffs on India against what it had signed at WTO, even the significance of a deal remains a question mark. Is the deal sanguine from the US perspective? Remains a question mark. So it'll always be a developing story in that sense. Personally, I believe that before the first half of this year, we should be able to wrap up the India-US BTA. But the question really is, even if we wrap it up, if things change on the ground, will the US continue to honor the deal? And that's a separate question altogether.
Jayjit Bhattacharya, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us here on the broadcast. Great pleasure, as always. We now turn on to our next story, and we head over to the Middle East. And France has urged Iran to abandon what it calls its role as a destabilizing power in the Middle East. Speaking in Beirut, the French Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, said Tehran must make major concessions, scale back its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, and end support for armed groups that threaten regional and European security. Barrot warned that any military escalation between the United States and Iran would risk dragging the wider region into conflict and called on Iran-backed groups to exercise restraint. He also stressed that Lebanon must stay out of any confrontation. His remarks come as Washington and Tehran hold nuclear talks in Oman amid rising tensions and an increased US military presence in the region. Let's listen into what the French Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, had to say.
Il faut évidemment que l'Iran, et c'est l'objet des discussions qui, si je comprends bien, se sont tenues en Oman aujourd'hui, doit aussi renoncer à être une puissance déstabilisatrice dont le programme nucléaire, le programme de missiles, le programme balistique et le soutien à des groupes terroristes dans la région soulèvent des menaces pour les pays du Proche et du Moyen-Orient comme pour les pays européens.
Dr. Satoru Nagao joins us now. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He joins us live from Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Some strong words there from the French Foreign Minister. Why is France taking such a hard line on this issue now? Does this reflect wider European frustration with Tehran?
Yes, I think so. Because this is based on the long-term background history. Because Iran supports Hezbollah in the Lebanon, and Hezbollah intervened the civil war in Syria. So, view from this, of course, this region is divided to many groups, but at the same time, the Iran's intervention escalates the conflict. And in the Gulf, there are different aspects, but anyway, the same thing could happen because Shia-populated regions supported by Iran and agitated Iran, the Shia people should claim the resources came from their land as their own resources. But in this case, the Shia region is oil-rich region, but the government, Saudi Arabia, the king family, royal family, Bahrain, the UAE, every time these are the Sunnah. So that's why if the Shia agitate this movement, this could be the revolution in this region. So every time Iran's policy to push Shia in this region is destabilizing the stability in this region. So that's why Iran's role is destabilizing role and view from not only view from the Western country but also the view from the Sunni Arabs in this region. What Iran is doing is destabilizing the role, so that is not good anyway.
And do you think Iran can realistically be pressured into rolling back its ballistic missile program, as well as its support for regional proxy groups, even with US talks in Oman? It seems pretty reluctant to get against doing those things and says only its nuclear file is on the table. What does this say about Iran's stance right now?
At least Iranian government believes this policy is good because of their perception towards the region, I believe. So that's why claiming the Shia's move is good for their belief. And so that's why firstly they need to possess a nuclear weapon. So in this case, Western country cannot intervene. The secondary, this nuclear weapon should be against Israel in this region or against the United States. So that's why even if Iran claims this is a peaceful purpose space program, that could be the ICBM program for Iran to reach the United States, but something like that is existing in this place. So that's why when the U.S. make pressure toward Iran, but Iran's response is how to make time to develop these kind of weapons. So that's why the view from the United States, this is not a proper response from the Iran. So so the situation is not good.
Dr. Nagao, stay with us as we turn to our next story. And US President Donald Trump has confirmed that very good talks are taking place regarding Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, adding that something could be on the horizon very soon. Negotiators from the US and Ukraine are aiming for a peace deal by March, though challenges remain, especially concerning the territorial issues. Meanwhile, a prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine has been agreed. However, the US is considering additional sanctions on Russia, particularly targeting its oil companies. Despite the difficulties, these talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia have sparked renewed hopes of a possible resolution in the near future. Dr. Nagao joins us once again on this issue. These very good talks, we know that a prisoner swap has been agreed. Is this significant in the grand scheme of things? We know that the biggest issues are territory and, of course, control of certain nuclear plants, the Zaporozhye nuclear plant. Does a prisoner swap signify that these talks are going well behind those closed doors?
At least better than nothing, that is true. Prisoner swap is one of the key issues to both of two, Russia and Ukraine can agree. So that's why every time they negotiate and they fail to ceasefire, but at the same time, prisoner swap has happened. So that's why it's better than nothing, that is true. And currently, the problem is Ukraine try to seek the security and Russia try to seek the territory, and how to exchange is the matter. But territories, will Russia satisfy this level? That is also a matter. So that's why, indeed, Russia will not satisfy the level of the territories they will get through the negotiation. So that's why, in this case, Russia want restart the war in the future. But this means that the security the Ukraine want to get is under threat. So that's why, indeed, in this negotiation, the exchange between the security, Ukraine's security and Russia's territory, this is indeed a very difficult deal. So under such kind of situations, without something, the agreement, ceasefire negotiation itself will end. And in this case, every time they agree the prisoner swap, that is happening repeatedly.
Yes, and Dr. Nagao, we're now heading into more talks which are set to start again next week. We've seen escalation on both sides, a reported attempted assassination attempt of a Russian official yesterday, shot in the middle of Moscow. while Russia continues to hit Ukraine with barrages of aerial strikes on an almost daily basis. Does diplomacy really work when it comes to the background of these escalating violence underlaying these talks?
At least so far, diplomacy hasn't worked well. But diplomacy is the only way to end this war. That is also true. So that's why diplomacy is very important. And the two sides are negotiating under the arrangement of the President Trump. And so that is still moving. But at the same time, indeed, the Russian side want to get the benefit, which is the territory. But at the same time, they want to get potential to get a more bigger victory in the future. So that's why it is not easy to end completely. So that's why this negotiation itself is very difficult. So under current situations, both sides prepare the two situations. One situation is the agreement has happened, but another situation is if the war continues, still they get advantage is the strategy of the both sides of the both Ukraine and Russia. So that's why they continue to fight. Continue to damage other military. So that's why the war is ongoing, negotiation is ongoing. So both moving at the same time. That is happening just now, I think.
And the United States is considering further sanctions on Moscow, particularly aiming at these oil companies. Given that the sanctions haven't crippled Russia's economy as much as previously expected, is it still an effective tool to use on Moscow?
Sanction is useful diplomatic card. Russia want to avoid that is true. But at the same time, is it enough to persuade Russia to agree the ceasefire? It's indeed controversial. So that's why, because Russia can get the oil, Russia can get the food in their country. So this means that their economy is not so developed, not sophisticated, but still they can live. So that's why if something sanction imposed Russia, and in this case, will Russia give up the war? Indeed, this is very difficult because they can survive. This material is raw material, not sophisticated, but this is vital to live. So that's why Russia can live, and that's why Russia will not become surrender.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you here on NewsX World. We turn now to Latin America, and the Colombian Foreign Minister, Rosa Villavicencio, and Ecuador's Foreign Minister, Ms. Gabriela Sommerfeld, have agreed to strengthen security along the border after negotiations in Quito to de-escalate a trade war between the two nations triggered by disagreements over the fight against drug trafficking. The two South American countries have imposed reciprocal 30% tariffs on dozens of products after Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa accused Colombia of not doing enough to combat organized crime at their shared border. Meanwhile, Colombian Foreign Minister and Defense Ministers have responded. Let's take a listen in to what they had to say.
Proponemos pues un trabajo mancomunado que logre incrementar la lucha contra el narcotráfico con la participación y la coordinación también con Ecuador, como se ha venido dando, pero de forma mucho más permanente y coordinada. Abordamos de manera franca los aspectos y las diferencias y propusimos diferentes soluciones que esperamos den continuidad al diálogo que hemos iniciado hoy y que no ha terminado con, digamos, temas y soluciones concretas, pero que van.
También de la mano de Estados Unidos y con Ecuador, adelantamos una prueba piloto para un centro de fusión de inteligencia que permita conocer la amenaza independientemente en qué lugar se encuentra para atacarla con total contundencia.
The US Justice Department is currently investigating Netflix's $82.7 billion acquisition bid for Warner Brothers Discovery to determine if anti-competitive practices were involved. The department is focused on whether Netflix's actions could negatively affect industry competition. Meanwhile, Netflix has confirmed that it's engaging constructively in the merger review process. However, the investigation is still in its early stages, and the deal could face further scrutiny from both the UK and the European Union. Additionally, Paramount's own acquisition bid was rejected by Warner Brothers' board, citing concerns over its inadequacy. Further developments in this case are expected. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has departed for a two-day visit to Malaysia. He will hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. This marks Modi's first visit to Malaysia and first since ties were upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership in August of 2024. Modi will attend a welcome ceremony at the Perdana Putra building, visit the Malaysian PM's residence, hold one-on-one and delegation-level talks, exchange MOUs and address the press. An official lunch banquet will also be hosted. He will meet the Indian diaspora of nearly 2.75 million and interact with business leaders. Malaysia is a key partner in India's Act East policy and the ASEAN and Indo-Pacific regions. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.